My boss fired me. Now I earn double his salary. When I look back on the day, everything collapsed. It's strange how ordinary it seemed at first. I remember waking up to my alarm, groggy but determined to push through another day. I made coffee, buttoned my shirt, and walked to the office with the usual swarm of numbers and unfinished tasks buzzing in my head. The office itself smelled of stale printer ink and artificial air freshener. People tapped on keyboards, phones rang, and a dull monotone of corporate life filled the background. It was all routine. But that morning, something in the atmosphere felt charged like static before a storm. My boss, Mr. Smirnoff, was already waiting for me. He was a man who believed silence was more intimidating than shouting. His leadership style was precise, almost clinical. Numbers, graphs, deadlines, those were his tools. Inspiration and encouragement, non-existent. "Come in," he said when I walked past his door. I stepped into his office, trying to hide the knot tightening in my chest. His desk was immaculate except for a single file folder. My name was printed on the cover in bold. "Sit down," he ordered. I sat, heart racing. He slid the folder across the desk. Inside was my latest financial analysis report, covered in red ink. The handwriting wasn't even his. I recognized one of the senior manager's notes. Someone who had always looked for a chance to undermine me. "These are sloppy mistakes," Smirnoff said. "Formatting issues, delays in sending updates, numbers that don't align with the new template." "They're not mistakes," I replied, forcing calm into my voice. "They're variations. The data is accurate. The format doesn't change the outcome." But my defense didn't matter. His mind was already made up. "I can't have an employee who resists structure," he said. Then, almost casually, he added, "Sign this resignation letter. It'll be easier for both of us." My throat went dry. I stared at the document. Resignation. My hands trembled. I had sacrificed weekends, evenings, even parts of my health for this job. I had done everything asked of me, more than was reasonable. And yet here I was being dismissed like a faulty machine. I began. But he cut me off. "You want a recommendation, then sign. If you refuse, it'll go on record as termination for incompetence." The words hit me like bullets. It wasn't a choice. It was blackmail dressed as formality. My palms sweated as I picked up the pen. Somewhere deep inside, a voice screamed at me to fight, but fear silenced it. In that moment, fear of losing everything, the stability, the paycheck, the little security I had won. I signed. When I walked out of his office, the world felt heavier. My coworkers glanced at me, but quickly looked away, as if unemployment was contagious. My desk was cleared in silence. By the time I stepped into the street, I felt like I had stepped into a void. No job, no plan, just fear. The first week after losing my job felt like drowning. Every morning, I woke up to an alarm that no longer had a purpose. The hours dragged on in silence, broken only by the sound of bills landing in my mailbox. I scrolled through job boards obsessively, sending out resumes like desperate SOS signals. But deep down, I knew. Positions like the one I had didn't come easily. The market was flooded. Competition was brutal. Rejections came faster than interviews. I tried to tell myself it was a blessing in disguise, that I'd find something better. But the truth, I felt humiliated. I replayed that moment in the office again and again, wondering what I could have done differently. Sometimes at night, I'd whisper to myself, "You're not worthless. You're not finished." But it felt like a lie. By the second week, desperation pushed me to take small freelance gigs. A friend asked if I could help optimize his shop's expenses. Another acquaintance needed financial projections for a startup pitch. The payments were small, barely enough to cover groceries, but each task gave me something more valuable, a reminder that I still had skills worth paying for. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark. Not a flame, but enough to remind me that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't broken. Still, the voice of doubt was always there. "This isn't sustainable. You'll run out of money. You'll never climb back to where you were." And yet, another voice, quieter but persistent, whispered, "What if you don't have to climb back? What if you can build something new?" That thought terrified me and thrilled me at the same time. The first month after being forced out was a blur of panic and exhaustion. Every day felt like a test of survival. The small freelance projects I had managed to grab barely kept me afloat. Rent, utilities, groceries, those weren't going to wait for me to figure out my life. Still, each project, no matter how small, gave me something my old job never did: ownership. When I worked for Smirnoff, every success was his to claim and every failure was mine to shoulder. But now, if a client thanked me, the credit was mine alone. If I failed, I had no one to blame but myself. The strange thing was, even in failure, I felt freer than I had in years. But freedom had its price. Nights were the worst. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, my mind running in circles. What if I failed? What if I ended up broke? What if my resume looked like a stain no company wanted to touch? Some nights, I cursed at Smirnoff, imagining him in his office, smug and satisfied that he had cut me down. I pictured him sipping coffee from that stupid porcelain mug he always kept on his desk, convinced the world was running perfectly under his control. Other nights, though, I cursed myself. Why hadn't I fought harder? Why had I signed that resignation letter? Maybe I could have taken him to HR. Maybe I could have refused and forced him to go through the formal process. But it was too late now. The paper was signed. The damage was done. It happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I had just finished calculating some cost-saving measures for a small, family-owned bakery. The owner, an older woman with kind eyes, hugged me after I presented the numbers. "You saved us from closing down," she said. "I don't know how to thank you." Her gratitude hit me harder than any paycheck. For the first time, I saw what my skills could mean outside of corporate walls. I wasn't just crunching numbers, I was helping people survive, even thrive. That moment lit something inside me. I started to believe that maybe I didn't need another boss. Maybe I could be my own. I threw myself into freelancing with more determination. I updated my LinkedIn profile, built a simple website, and joined online groups where entrepreneurs and small businesses looked for consultants. Work trickled in slowly at first. A startup needing projections, a shop owner confused by taxes, a friend of a friend who wanted advice on cutting unnecessary expenses. Each job was different, messy, unstructured. Nothing like the neat, suffocating order Smirnoff enforced. But I thrived in the chaos. For the first time in years, I was learning again, improvising, adapting, finding creative solutions. Clients started recommending me to others. Word of mouth spread faster than I expected. By the end of the second month, I wasn't just scraping by, I was actually making enough to breathe a little easier. Despite the progress, the temptation to go back to corporate life lingered. Stability still whispered in my ear. Job postings promised benefits, paid vacations, predictable paychecks. I applied to a few positions out of fear more than desire. But every interview felt wrong. Sitting across from recruiters, rehearsing scripted answers about teamwork and alignment with company values, I felt like a liar. My heart wasn't in it. One night, after another rejection email, I asked myself, why am I trying to go back to the same system that broke me? The answer was obvious: fear. I was scared to bet on myself completely, but fear had already taken enough from me. Then came the email that changed everything. A former client from my old company, the kind of client who always appreciated my work, reached out. "We've got a project," she wrote. "Our current team can't handle it. Someone mentioned you're consulting now. Would you be open to helping?" My hands trembled as I read it. This wasn't just a small gig, this was a large-scale analysis project. The kind of thing I used to do in the corporate world. The kind of thing I thought I'd never touch again after being pushed out. I said yes before I could second-guess myself. The work was grueling. Long nights, endless data, meetings that stretched for hours. But I loved it. Unlike before, I wasn't chained to a cubicle or reporting to a boss who didn't value me. I was the consultant. I was in charge. When I delivered the final presentation, the client's executives were stunned. Not only had I solved their immediate problem, but I had also given them a roadmap to increase profits over the next year. They cut me a check that was more than double my old monthly salary. I stared at the number in disbelief. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. A week later, I got another email, this time from the company I had once worked for. My old company. "Smirnoff mentioned you've been consulting." It read, "We have a project that requires outside expertise. Would you be interested?" My heart skipped a beat. They wanted me back not as an employee, but as an independent consultant. I laughed out loud, alone in my apartment. The same people who had tossed me aside were now willing to pay me more to fix problems they couldn't solve themselves. For the first time since that humiliating day in Smirnoff's office, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't powerless anymore. I wasn't disposable. I was in control. And Smirnoff, he didn't know it yet, but the tables had officially turned. When the email from my old company came through, I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it, to ignore them the way they had ignored me when I needed fairness. But another part of me, the stronger part, saw the irony. They had tossed me out like I was nothing. Now they were crawling back, willing to pay for the very skills they once dismissed. I accepted the offer, not out of kindness, but because I wanted to prove to myself that I had one. The first day I walked back into that office, not as an employee, but as a consultant, I felt a strange mix of nerves and triumph. My old co-workers glanced at me, their eyes wide with surprise. Some smiled, others looked away awkwardly. But the best part was Smirnov. He came into the conference room, clearly not expecting to see me there. For a brief moment, his mask cracked. Shock flickered across his face before he pulled it back into his usual cold expression. "Welcome," he said stiffly. I could almost hear the bitterness in his voice. He wasn't my boss anymore. He was just another client, and I was billing them more in a week than he paid me in a month. Consulting for my old company was surreal. I sat in the same conference rooms, but now my seat carried authority. People listened to me. They valued my input. Even executives leaned in when I spoke, because I was no longer just an employee. I was an outside expert. When I presented my solutions, Smirnov had no choice but to nod along. He couldn't undermine me the way he used to. The company was paying too much for my expertise, and the results spoke for themselves. For the first time, I realized something important. Sometimes the only way to win is to step out of the system that traps you. Inside, I was disposable. Outside, I was indispensable. Word of my success spread quickly. Other departments began contacting me for advice. Then other companies reached out after hearing about my work. Within months, I had more projects than I could handle alone. I hired an assistant, then another consultant to share the workload. Before long, I wasn't just freelancing, I was running a small firm. And every time I signed a new contract, every time I cashed a check larger than my old salary, I thought of that day in Smirnov's office. The humiliation, the fear, the hopelessness. Those feelings were gone now, replaced by confidence, by power. One afternoon, after a long meeting, Smirnov approached me privately. His tone was softer than I'd ever heard it. "You've done well," he said awkwardly. "Better than I expected." I almost laughed. Better than he expected? He had expected me to vanish, to fail, to crawl back begging for mercy. Instead, I was standing in front of him earning double his salary, free from his control. "Thank you," I replied, keeping my voice calm. "Leaving here turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me." He gave a stiff nod, but I could see the frustration in his eyes. He knew exactly what I meant. That conversation was short, but it meant everything to me. It was proof that I had broken free of his shadow. My life transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. I no longer dreaded mornings. I no longer lived in fear of a boss's mood swings or arbitrary demands. Instead, I built relationships with clients who respected my work. I had time to choose projects that excited me. I could take a vacation without begging for approval. Financially, I was earning more than I ever thought possible. But more importantly, I had regained my dignity. The humiliation of being forced out had turned into the foundation of my success. Looking back, I see now that getting fired wasn't the end. It was the beginning. It forced me to confront my fears, to step outside the safety net of a paycheck, and to realize that I was capable of so much more than I believed. Smirnov thought he was cutting me down. In reality, he set me free. And in the sweetest twist of fate, the very company that once saw me as replaceable now depended on me more than ever. One evening, as I reviewed invoices, I noticed something that made me smile. The monthly payment from my old company signed off by Smirnov himself was nearly twice what his own salary had been when I worked there. It hit me like a thunderclap. I wasn't just surviving. I wasn't just proving him wrong. I was living a life on my own terms, making more than he ever had. The irony was almost poetic. The boss who once fired me was now, in a way, working for me, and I had never felt more alive. There's a strange kind of silence that comes after a storm. For months, my life had been chaos, desperation, hustling for clients, sleepless nights, endless calculations. But now, standing on the other side of it, I felt a calm I had never known before. I had gone from being humiliated and discarded to building a career on my own terms. And the sweetest part, the very company that had once thrown me away now relied on me. Every invoice I sent them was like a receipt of justice. Back when I worked under Smirnov, I thought power meant having authority over others. He was the boss, and his word was law. I believed that if I climbed high enough, I'd finally feel secure. But true power wasn't about climbing someone else's ladder. True power was owning my own. Now, clients listened to me because they needed me, not because they were afraid of me. They valued my insight, respected my boundaries, and paid me fairly for my work. That was power. Smirnov could fire employees, but he couldn't fire me. Not anymore. Success has a way of fueling itself. Once I stopped living in survival mode, I started thinking bigger. I didn't just want to be a consultant, I wanted to build something lasting. I hired a small team, analysts, marketers, even a junior consultant who reminded me of myself. A few years early, eager but undervalued. I swore I'd never treat him the way Smirnov treated me. Together, we took on larger clients, expanded into new industries, and built a reputation as problem solvers who delivered results. Some months, I earned more in a single contract than I used to make in an entire year. But beyond the money, what mattered most was freedom. I chose my projects. I set my schedule. I had the time and resources to actually live my life. One evening, I attended a business networking event. The room buzzed with chatter, clinking glasses, and the hum of opportunity. And then, across the room, I saw him Smirnoff. He looked older, more tired than I remembered. His once confident posture seemed deflated. Rumor had it his rigid style was falling out of favor, that his department was underperforming. When he noticed me, there was a flicker of recognition, followed by something else: hesitation, maybe even shame. "Good to see you," he said stiffly when we finally crossed paths. "You too," I replied with a polite smile. We exchanged a few words, nothing hostile, but the imbalance was clear. He was still locked inside the system, chained to corporate politics. I was free. For the first time, I felt no anger toward him, only pity. People often ask me if I ever got revenge. Did I confront him? Did I rub my success in his face? The truth is, I didn't need to. My life itself was revenge enough. Every project I completed, every client I helped, every dollar I earned on my own terms was proof that he hadn't broken me. He had launched me. The best revenge wasn't shouting at him. It was living better than he ever imagined I could. Looking back, I see 3 lessons that changed everything for me. 1. Getting fired isn't the end. It feels like death in the moment, but sometimes it's the beginning of something greater. 2. Freedom is worth the fear. Starting over terrified me, but nothing is scarier than staying trapped where you're not valued. 3. Respect beats security. A paycheck without respect is a leash. Respect, on the other hand, brings both dignity and true stability. These truths reshaped not just my career, but my entire outlook on life. Today, I wake up without an alarm most mornings. I choose the projects that excite me, decline the ones that don't, and travel when I want to. My firm continues to grow, but I've kept one promise to myself: never become the kind of boss Smirnoff was. I mentor my team, celebrate their wins, and give them space to fail and learn, because I know what it feels like to be crushed by someone who thinks control is more important than humanity, and I refuse to repeat that cycle. Sometimes, late at night, I think back to the version of me who sat in that office, pen in hand, signing away his dignity on a resignation letter. I wish I could tell him, "Don't be afraid. This is the best thing that will ever happen to you." The irony still makes me smile. The boss who once humiliated me ended up proving my worth without even realizing it. If he hadn't forced me out, I might still be stuck in that office, grinding away for scraps of recognition. Instead, I earn more than double his salary. I live freer, happier, stronger than ever before. And every time I look at my bank account or see the gratitude in a client's eyes, I know one thing for certain: Smirnoff didn't ruin me. He made me.